fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and we got Mr. Wedding Holly here.
Yes, that is correct. My son got married over the weekend, and I am completely exhausted, but happy.
Yeah. Oh, it's
went well.
Yeah. So is that like 4 down, 4 to go or something?
It's a 2 down, 4 to go. Yes, I have 6. I think the next 4 is going to be about 10 years before we see anything happen. But more grandkids probably before that happens. My 4 younger ones are still enjoying themselves without any girlfriends.
Well, I saw the title of this book and I thought about you. So
that's right.
Yeah, we got New York Times best-selling author here, and her new book, If Looks Could Kill, Julie Berry. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to join you.
Let's talk about you before we get into the book. And what kind of writer would you consider yourself? Like, if someone said, "Oh, what do you write?" What do you answer people?
Well, I say that I write for people who don't yet pay taxes, because I write for teenagers, but also for middle graders and for children. I have picture books. So I really kind of cover the whole spectrum of, learning your first words all the way up through adolescent angst. But in reality, my teen novels are very much crossover. So they're read by adults as much as by youth, and a lot of book clubs read them. And I'm often asked, why did you call that a teen book? It felt like an adult book. But because to me, there's a great story is a great story, so I'm not too worried about that. But I write for young people, and I like historical fiction, especially for the older teens, and I tend to weave in an element of myth or a subtle hint of fantasy or mysticism into those stories. But at the end of the day, they're very solidly researched historical fiction novels.
So when you write like middle grade or teen novels like this, and you are covering historical fiction, and like in this book, which we'll get into, some of them are a little bit scarier or, things like that. Is there a different way of approaching your writing when you write for a younger crowd than older when it comes to, let's say, I don't know, the theme or even the violence or the kind of the idea of the book?
I think there are some differences. I feel like when I'm writing for middle graders, I have a lot of permission to be playful and silly. Young audiences love that. But I think teens do as well. They're straddling childhood and adulthood and trying to find their way into that world that they're starting to realize is somewhat disillusioning and certainly dark and dangerous, but also filled with a lot of opportunity and privilege and power. So I think you'll see in If Looks Could Kill, there is humor woven throughout, but it is Medusa versus Jack the Ripper. So we definitely do go to the dark side and kind of explore some of that hard stuff. And I feel like teens are ready for it. It's just a matter of how it's presented to them. I think that it's written thoughtfully and not in a gory way, but we don't shy away from the hard things that Jack the Ripper did.
So now let's talk about, give the basic premise of this book. So If Looks Could Kill, what are readers getting in this story?
So it's a historical thriller, and it's set in 1888, mostly in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And we start out with 2 focal point characters narrating to us. One of them is Jack the Ripper himself in the very beginning, and the other is Tabitha, a young woman who is a Salvation Army volunteer in the sort of crowded and impoverished Lower East Side of New York. And she and a companion girl named Pearl, they don't get along, but they're trying to do their Salvation Army work. And they become aware of a young woman who has been kidnapped into a brothel. And so they decide together to try to help this girl escape from the brothel. And in the process of mounting this, needle in a haystack rescue effort that they're totally unequipped to pull off on their own, they come in contact with, of course they don't know it at the time, but they come in contact with none other than Jack the Ripper. I made the Ripper suspect, Francis Tumblety, whom my colleague has studied so extensively, I made him my Ripper in the story for reasons I can get into in a bit. So they encounter him, and this unleashes up into their lives and into the city a force of female vengeance that is personified by Medusa. And the idea is, of course, Medusa herself was a victim of violence, and she ultimately was, murdered in a cruel and senseless act of violence. And the parallels are kind of striking, right? She's asleep, her throat is cut, her head is severed. And so to me, there was like this mythic resonance between Medusa of myth and Jack the Ripper of, relative modernity. So Medusa is out to get vengeance on people like Jack, on the worst of the worst. And so these girls' lives get caught up in both this effort to help young women and this effort to sort of fight their battles for them, as personified through Medusa and Jack the Ripper. So it is a thriller, and you end up with Jack hunting Medusa and Medusa hunting Jack, although neither of them are quite sure, neither of them are fully aware of all of what the other is.
So in writing this book, how much is real and how much is fictionalized, especially with the characters?
Well, if you set aside for a moment the idea that certain young women can become gorgons with snakes for hair, which is something that I, brought in from mythology. As for the rest, it's very solidly researched. So, everything that is set in the East End of London when we're following Jack is drawn from Mike Hawley's research into the movements of Francis Tumblety. So, of course, we have to say that it is fiction because we can't know for certain if Francis Tumblety was the Ripper. But I've made the poetic leap to say that he was, and then based the Ripper's actions and movements on Francis Tumblety's known actions and movements. And so we brought him to the city and into the place where we know he went. And then as far as the other characters, Pearl and Tabitha are fictional creations, but they are based on young volunteers in the Salvation Army, which was notable because it gave girls and women a sort of equal footing with men. And I think that was what made it very attractive to girls and women. It was kind of like joining the Peace Corps today, a chance to kind of go travel and do some good in the world and gain some interesting experiences and friendships. So it's really, if you allow for the possibility of Medusa, and if you play along with the idea that Francis Tumblety was Jack the Ripper, the rest is pretty solid.
It was really nice, when Julie asked me to read her manuscript and to see if it was historically accurate, as with both Jack the Ripper, the Whitechapel murders, and Francis Tumblety. It was exciting because already she had a good grasp. So then I kind of filled in a lot of the details. But what I caught myself doing is, as I'm working on the manuscript with the Whitechapel murders in East End, I'm catching myself reading about the other side, your protagonists. So because it was such a good book, so I had to stop myself and go back. Okay, this is what she's looking for. So it was really nice.
Well, it was so much fun to work with Mike. And now, Francis Tumblety is buried in Rochester. He, born in Ireland, but his family immigrated to Rochester when he was, I think, a teenager. And so he's kind of based there. And I live about an hour away in Medina, New York, where I own a little bookstore. And Mike is, based also in Western New York. But we didn't know each other. And it just so happened that I was at a Christmas party, and someone said to me, "Hey, what are you writing?" And I usually don't answer that question. I'm usually kind of guarded about talking about my projects when they're early on. But I said, "Well, I'm writing a Medusa versus Jack the Ripper novel." And someone said, "My high school teacher knows all about that local Ripper suspect. Have you heard of him?" And I had just made the decision that I wanted to base the Ripper on him, or that I wanted to learn more about him. So it was really serendipitous that we were introduced. And Mike was so generous and shared with me, manuscripts that weren't even yet published, books that are obviously now out in the world. His research was so thorough that I was able to just pick Francis Tumblety up out of history and plop him into my novel. And really, Mike, you tell me, but did I change much about who Tumblety is as you understand him?
Not so much, but that's what it intrigued me, because when we found the 40 sworn testimonies in a court case after Tumblety had passed away, 40 sworn testimonies of Tumblety, people that knew Tumblety in the last 20 years of his life. It was really excellent to get this guy's personality and how much he lacked remorse, even when he was molesting young men. And to find out in your book you were looking for a character just like that, and that's kind of how you were producing them. It was really nice to see that you nailed that.
So whose point of view do you write from? Like when you write a book like this, is there one character or several characters or an outside looking in?
My last few novels for teens have had, they've been multi-voiced novels, multiple points of view, not like 24 or anything, but our main focal point characters are Jack the Ripper himself. We just call him Jack throughout until later on when we sort of reveal his name to be Francis Tumblety. And then Tabitha Woodward, the Salvation Army recruit, who is our main protagonist, and her companion Pearl does become a voice as well later on. And so there's an addition there where Tabitha's, young and innocent, idealistic, very spunky, and, has lived a somewhat sheltered life and has not really encountered the dark side of life too much. And then you pair that with someone who is perfectly morally at ease with the idea of butchering and slaughtering women and harvesting their organs. And I found that to be a really fun creative challenge, but also, obviously a really troubling one, because I didn't want to write about Jack the Ripper in a way that adds to his mystique or glorifies him in any way. But that's what I loved about what Mike was able to offer me, is just this incredible depth of detail about his life, so that I could show him in all his sort of mundane pettiness, and because I really think he was. Now, maybe we should just sketch in real briefly. Mike, do you want to just give like the 30-second view of what makes Tumblety such an attractive Ripper suspect? Granted that we can't know, but like there's some really juicy things about him.
Oh yeah, so well he was an absolute narcissist for sure, and but like not only, I mean it's amazing this guy. He was, well, first of all, he was a quack doctor. When he came to New York, he learned the ropes from a couple of different kinds of quack doctors, and he became the amazing. He could scam anyone, and he was actually quite brilliant at it. And he would do something, for example, if a young man would come into his office, say, because he has an acne problem, and so Tumblety would say, "Oh, you're a goner. You actually have consumption, tuberculosis. Good news. You give me this amount of money, which is a whole bunch money, and a gold watch. Come back, I'll give you these pills. 2 weeks later, you will be cured." And he did that so well, he convinced so many people that he had so many testimonials that they were convinced he did it. And but in the meantime, he was molesting young men and wherever he went. And but his history, because he was such a he would come into a city almost circus style when he was doing this and get all the attention and just advertise like crazy. But he was still antisocial. He wouldn't speak to people. He was kind of just an interesting character, so much so, even during the Civil War, here it is, a guy, he had like a uterus collection. How many people do you know that has a uterus collection? And then during the year of the Ripper murders, he told this Toronto reporter that he was constantly in dread of sudden death because of kidney and heart disease, and here's Jack the Ripper, took the uterus out of 2 of his victims and the kidney and heart. He's connected to these organs, and no one else is. And so it's like, and then it's just, one time I was asked to do a documentary, and they were going to have 3 other suspects that they wanted to do. Someone said, "Hey, talk to Hawley about this Tumblety guy." And after I talked to the producer about him, he goes, "I don't care if this guy was Jack the Ripper. He's the most interesting. I want him." So I got to be on this documentary because this guy was so bizarre.
It's one of those, like, whether he's the Ripper or no, he was a real person, and it's definitely a truth is stranger than fiction kind of moment.
Yes.
I mean, as a character, you couldn't ask for more. He's just so odd, and his psychological profile is pretty detailed in Mike's writings. As for why Medusa and Jack the Ripper at all, like why did I go there? I had decided I wanted to write a Medusa story, and I had decided I wanted to set it in the late Victorian era, but in New York City. So like Gilded Age, gangs of New York, Lower East Side, gritty, filled with a diverse population sort of jostling at the elbows. So I already had that setting, and I knew I wanted a story. I wanted one story where a sort of superhero element is female and has the power to enact justice upon men who are violent specifically to women. And I'm talking like horrifically violent, right? I'm talking like the sort of special cases. I just wanted one story where the girls can fight back, where through the magic of superhero stories, the physical imbalance is leveled. There's a disruption in the playing field, and I just wanted that. But I also knew that if you're going to have Medusa in a story, you've got to turn some people to stone. You've got to, I mean, it's kind of a Chekhov's gun. And I don't actually believe in a world where, you know, everyone who's done something, even something horrible, should just be ended as a result of it. So how to reconcile this problem? I actually do believe in a more, shall we say, rehabilitative approach to justice than a, you know, off with their heads approach. So how do I reconcile that story appetite for some girls kicking butt, and the way that I actually feel that we should administer justice in a society that honors the rule of law and tries to be humane? And I decided that the solution was a really special kind of villain and where to find him. And I'm reading and I'm researching about the Bowery neighborhood of the Lower East Side, and I come across this passing mention that one of the famous personalities who spent some time living in the Bowery, and there are many, but one of them may have been Jack the Ripper. And it was like a hallelujah moment for me, because I knew if ever there was a man to walk this earth, that nobody would blame me if I wanted to sick some Medusas on him. It was Jack the Ripper. And so, you know, I didn't cook this up with some sort of story agenda. He was right there in the research, right there in the details. And that to me is the really fun part of writing historical fiction, is if you just really immerse yourself in the story, in the research, in the facts, in the real history as much as you're able to acquire it, the story bubbles up from the material. Like, I don't need to bring much of my own ideas or agendas to it. I just fall down the rabbit hole and the crazy characters present themselves. That's how it came to be, and that's how I decided to tell these people at this Christmas party that I was writing about Medusa versus Jack the Ripper. And lo and behold, here comes my collie with every possible fact I could ever want, and then some.
It is kind of funny when you asked me to do the book launch, and when you said, hey, I'll have you do 15 minutes of lecture to kind of give the background, and I'm thinking, shoot, I'm an hour and a half kind of talker, and I tried my best. I think I made it, shorten it to 20 minutes, right? And that was as best I could get.
Great.
So, but what it was, to me, is still intriguing is that how you separated the difference, and I don't want to really give anything away, but here's these serial killers, and then especially that really lack remorse, and it's almost it's a different twist than some of the bad men through history that don't lack remorse. They do have a little bit of guilt in them. And I just love the way how you kind of work that in. It was,
so I took some liberties with how we conventionally render Medusa. Medusa, in the stories that we have inherited, turns everyone to stone with a single glance. And she's this, unanswerable force. It's this inexorable power. One look and you're done. And that is actually kind of a story buzzkill. I mean, where do you go with that? You can't have characters that can interact with the world, make friends, talk to you. And I wanted Medusas not only who could sort of turn their power on or off and kind of go incognito through the streets of Manhattan, but I also wanted Medusas who could control the levers of power so that they could determine the degree of effect that their power would have on someone, whether it just sort of gave them the willies or stunned them a little bit or knocked them senseless for a moment or really gave them some bad nightmares or, all the way to classic petrification. I wanted Medusas who could make moral choices. I wanted Medusas who had that kind of power and that kind of control of it. And so that meant I needed a mechanism for how girls could become these Medusas and how the rules worked. And so I decided that that there would be times when a Medusa, it would be rare for a Medusa to actually try to kill someone. But that if she did try to kill someone, there would be times when it would not work. And it would not work because if the principle of how a Medusa turns you to stone is the principle of fear and terror, that would be based on the guilt that, that men have toward, how shall I say? I don't mean all men. Men who are cruel to women, right? They know it. They know they've done wrong. They know it. Men who exploit women know it. And they always know that someday the bill might come due. So long as they can control society and so long as they're bigger and stronger and have all the money, then they can usually kind of keep things working the way they want. But the greatest fear of people who exploit others is that someday vengeance will come back for them. If one of them on which that would operate is that guilt, and so if you feels no guilt, is incapable of feeling force, which is based on avenging the wrongs done to women. If you think any innate and intrinsic worth, then you actually will feel justified in harm. So Francis Tumbleby kind of handed me the solution to my problem because he was this amoral being who so utterly lacked regard for female flesh and so utterly lacked regard really for any other human but himself. And that kind of gave me the mechanism that I needed to make it so that, well, I guess, like you say, Mike, it's easy to give away too much. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, that's right.
I needed to attach Medusa's wrath to Jack, and I needed Medusa to be able to sort of put a curse on him when the attempt to actually end him failed, and it failed because of who he was.
And so, is there a subtext to this story? Is there something you hope the reader takes away that's beyond the entertainment value?
Oh, yeah. For me, always, entertainment is the primary goal, and I don't look down my nose at entertainment. I think sometimes we treat art or literature as though if it's merely entertaining, that's somehow lesser, as though entertainment should be a sermon or something. And to me, it's a great privilege if I can, keep you up past bedtime turning the pages because you're dying to know what comes next. That's what stories are for. And I never go into stories with a moral in mind in advance. But I will say that writing this story kind of brought me to the place where I think one of the most important things about this expedition into fantasy, asking ourselves what would it be like if girls had this power, was the realization that after they'd had this power for a while, they no longer even needed to use it. They simply knew they had it. They knew they did not need to be afraid. And once they no longer were afraid, their behavior changed and people responded to them differently. And the kinds of creepy men who might have attempted to prey upon them before were just sort of stymied by the sheer aura of personal power that they carried with them. And so my question is, I've been on a nationwide tour visiting 3 and 4 schools a day, talking to high schoolers about this story. My question for them is, we have inherited a culture that is so cavalier about violence against women. I mean, it wasn't that Jack the Ripper killed women, right? It was that he killed them in a strange and inexplicable way. Women showing up dead on the streets of London or Manhattan or anywhere else in the 1880s or since barely attracts comment, right? I mean, that's the world we've all inherited. So my question for them is specifically for girls and women, can we just agree to be fearless? Can we Medusify like these characters in the story? Can we be there to support one another? And can we confront this culture without fear by working together and by, showing up, but just refusing to play along with this dynamic? And my message for young men that were hearing me is, what are you going to do about this culture we've inherited? We don't need to keep it. What are you going to do when you see people, trolling girls online and being disgusting and talking about, sexually assaulting them? I mean, what are you going to do when people are talking in the locker room about getting someone drunk and then, everybody having sex with her? Like, what are you going to do when you confront this culture all the time? Because we all have the ability, we all have so much more influence than we think. We all have the ability to speak up and say, this is not okay. This is not acceptable. So I mean, am I an optimist? I am. Am I an idealist? Maybe, like Tabitha? I guess I am. But I believe that we can confront this. I believe that we can make change, and we should not just look away when girls and women.
We should Medusify.
Yeah, we should Medusify.
I like that. Medusify.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to have a world where girls and women are treated as second-class citizens and as treated as physical property. That's a choice we're all agreeing to together, maybe by deciding there's nothing we can do about it. But I think there is.
So how does something like this, when you go through the experience of writing this book, how does that change you?
Well, I love the characters. I love them so much, and it's so much fun to spend time with them. And when you're done, you mourn them. You miss that experience, and so that's a big part of it. I think there's always a sense of miracle, because every book you write, no matter how many you've written, every book is a new exercise in confronting your own fears. Can I do this? Can I do this again? Are my ideas any good? Do I have anything worthwhile to say? Is anyone going to want to hear it? And I promise it's true that no matter what accolades you may have had, you feel that every time. And so you are sort of moving forward in the dark, hoping that somehow, by some miracle and by that sort of inexplainable power of stories, it'll come together, and it will be something more than the sum of its parts. And so when it really does come together and people start to read it and they start to love it and the publisher responds with enthusiasm and like this week when it hits the New York Times bestseller list, it's pretty exciting. It debuted there, so that was so cool. But that feeling, right, of going full circle all the way from the depths of self-doubt and insecurity and uncertainty all the way through to completion, and then that gratification of seeing people respond to your story. There's nothing like it. It's incredible.
And meeting a Ripper agent expert, that was pretty good too.
I'm so indebted. I'm so indebted to scholars. I'm so indebted to historians and researchers who do the painstaking work of like mining the actual facts of human history, because we are so comfortable with a sort of Wikipedia level shorthand for what we think the story of history was. We're so comfortable with what we remember from ninth grade history, right? And carrying that through adulthood. And I'm so grateful for people like you, Mike, who like really took the time to really find the answers and really query, volumes of sources to find the truth. If it weren't for your patience in doing that, and I imagine you must have had times where you felt like, does anyone even care about, this particular lawsuit, blah, blah. I mean, did you feel that way?
Well, actually, there's like minds, because Al does the same thing. He recently had a book out, and if you read that, it's like everything is cited and all that stuff. It's like a group of, it's really, luckily there's people like that, but it's like you really, to me, it's just, I love discovery. It's just it's a really exciting thing. And then you guys, and then for you, I remember, I've written some fiction novels, and I'm proud of them. But when I started writing your fiction novel, I go, oh, I can learn more about this fiction thing. So it's a really nice one. And I think one time an editor said, with historical fiction especially, it's fiction, but you better have your facts right.
Oh yeah, no, my greatest fear is, being caught with my pants down and, not having done my homework accurately. So that's always really, really important to me. But I think, what this conversation reminds us of, right, is that like, if we follow what we really love, like you love that thrill of discovery, you love the research, you love that exploration, and I love learning all I can about it and then presenting it to the world dramatically, right, through characters, through scenes, through stories I made up that are fictional, but that adhere closely to the historical reality of the time and the psychological reality of how people thought and lived at the time. And so, like, you follow your bliss, you follow your curiosity, you follow what makes you happy and what, excites your neurons. I follow mine. And the end result is this really fascinating, symbiotic partnership. And I mean, I couldn't have written this book without you. Of course, you did. do all your stuff without me. But I hope that this has been a rewarding journey for you too. I hope.
Oh, absolutely has.
Well, let's talk about Julie, and where do people find Julie? Do you have social media? Do you have a website? Do you have a lemonade stand? Like where do people go when they want to connect with Julie?
Well, not a lemonade stand, but pretty close. I have an independent bookstore. Pretty fun.
Oh, that's good.
As Julie Berry, the author of books for humans, I can be found. My web address is julieberrybooks.com. And my handle on pretty much every social platform, TikTok, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, what am I forgetting? All of them. Facebook is Julie Berry Books. So that's where I am pretty much everywhere. But my bookstore is called Author's Note. So that's authorsnote.com, and we're Author's Note bookstore on most platforms. So definitely take a look there, and you can certainly get a signed book. We ship for free. But I will give a shout out to all independent bookstores and say, please support indie bookstores every chance you get, because they're a big part of how we're able to bring, new voices to the world and really celebrate local history and celebrate writers in their communities. So there's my commercial for independent bookstores. But support the one closest to you. And yeah, that's how you find me. And If Looks Could Kill just came out from Simon & Schuster on the 16th of September. And I'm still in the middle of this tour that'll be wrapping up in mid-October, and then I'll have a few more events down the road. So you might actually be able to find me in your neighborhood if you check my events page on my website. But it's been delightful talking with you. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Well, thank you very much, and we'll have all your information up. And what can I say? And if you run across Julie in your neighborhood, make sure she hasn't got snakes in her hair or anything like that. So be careful.
I do have very curly hair, so it might look like I do.
Oh, and also I recall you have some of those ones. What is that thing you put in your head that has some snakes in it that you guys bought? That's cool.
We had these headbands with golden snakes on them.
Yeah.
My booksellers and I wore Medusa headbands, which was pretty fun.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again in October, 2 times in October.
Yes.
Make sure you put one of those hats on, Michael.
I think we need to take the show on the road, Michael. I think that our 2-act play is a hit.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought so. I mean, they enjoyed it. I'm still getting responses from that,
good.
so that's nice.
I'm glad. That's great.
Well, again, the book, If Looks Could Kill, the author, Julie Berry. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, Julie.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.